Listen, I know that this game is 17 years old, but at the same time, a lot of people like myself haven't played it. So screw it. We're going to do a tips video. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and welcome back to the channel. Hello everyone. If you enjoy what I do, including coverage and even guides for new turn-based strategy RPGs, classic turn-based strategy RPGs like Joan of Arc, or anything else that I do here on the channel, a like on this video and a subscription to the channel would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. So yeah, there's been a lot of people in my comments and in my community talking about how they've never seen this game before, asking questions about it, asking where they can get it, saying they've always heard about it but never had the chance to play it, and that includes myself. Like, I've been looking at Joan of Arc, hearing people talk about Joan of Arc for 17 years, and it's only now that it's out on the PS4 and the PS5 that I'm getting around to checking it out. So I figured in the interest of helping out people in the community, I would put my thoughts to paper, so to speak, and go over some tips about the early game for Joan of Arc, or Jeanne D'Arc, and what I've found to be kind of optimal strategizing, character building, etc. So, getting right into it, number one, don't be afraid to grind. This is an older game, right? Came out 2006, 2007, and some of its design philosophies very much feel couched in that era, including the idea that, yeah, sometimes you're going to go to the next story mission and suddenly things are going to be a whole heck of a lot scarier and higher level than they were in the previous mission. As such, go back to old maps, do some battles, maybe even just one or two, get an extra level or two on your characters, and then come back and you'll be in a much better position. I've already had to do this a couple of times when I would wind up with just not quite enough power to be able to punch through and complete an objective without losing a character or just running out of time, since there's a timer on each map. Went back, went to some old maps, did a couple of little bonus missions, got a few levels, came back, was able to clear it, no problem. It didn't take long at all. Like, maps can be pretty quick in Joan of Arc, so don't be afraid to go back and do a little bit of grinding, and then come back once you've toughened up a little bit. I wouldn't overgrind, of course. That's always something that I would keep in mind when you're trying to get prepped for a new mission, but just a little bit of an extra boost is probably all that you're going to need. Number two, equip magic on everyone. This one is something that I've really been feeling extremely quickly, is even though you have a very limited number of skill slots that you can equip your various stat boosts, weapon skills, affinities, which we'll talk about soon, and magic into, it's just hugely beneficial to have offense, healing, or both magics set up on as many characters as possible. Seeing as how getting counterattacks and avoiding counterattacks, trying to deal with bosses that have very high stats, is a very big part of handling missions in Joan of Arc. Having the ability to have your basic swordsman or axeman or spearman have a ranged attack that they can soften enemies up with as they run up, or be falling back and hitting enemies, shooting over ledges, mountains, that type of stuff is hugely, hugely valuable for getting one up on the enemy before you wind up falling into melee combat. Having the ability to heal at range with heal magic is obviously huge. You know, healing herbs are great, but they cost money for one, and you have to be next to someone to be able to use it. So if you can't quite move close enough to someone who desperately needs a heal, having healing magic available is great. And even like your basic swordsmen who primarily just want to be in there tanking hits and dishing out damage are perfectly capable of using healing magic to give someone a nice boost to max or nearly max HP if they're low, which is awesome. As far as ranged damage is concerned, Fireball and Ice Magic are both great. I haven't really noticed a major difference in terms of damage output. There might be some affinity stuff going on there, but really, again, just having the option to have a swordsman throw a fireball at something to soften it up or finish something off that they can't quite get into range with is just, it's so huge. And yeah, magic is expensive. We'll talk about that in a second in terms of MP, but just having that ability to toss something around once or twice a map makes a huge, huge difference. Speaking of which, number three, don't waste your magic or transformations on basic enemies unless it is necessary. Now, this one goes more for your transformations than your magic, but as I mentioned in the previous point, even magic, that MP cost is nothing to sneeze at. It can take a while for a character, especially one that isn't kind of spec'd into using magic, to build up enough MP to actually start throwing magic around. So if you're going to be coming up on a boss soon, and you're going to want to be able to hit them with some magic to soften them up, or if they're heavily armored to just deal good damage, period, you're going to regret it if you wound up burning a fireball that it's going to take you 3 turns to get the MP for, to finish off some like dark elf archer that you could have just slapped with your sword, right? If you need to use it, by all means, go for it, but once you're getting close to a boss or some other big, dangerous enemy target, make sure that you're saving your MP to be able to use your magic on those enemies, or to be able to use special like weapon skills and things like that, if you happen to have them available, of course. As far as your transformations are concerned, this is primarily going to apply to Jeanne in the early game, although once you get Guile de Ray, then you'll have his transformations as well. But these are very limited, especially early on. Get a couple of turns, it takes time to charge up, and you get, yeah, a big stat boost, probably some special attacks. It's a very powerful swing, but it does not last very long. So make sure that you actually are saving these transformations and the stat boosts and attacks that they provide until you're actually ready to go fight the boss, whatever dangerous enemy you're trying to deal with, whatever it might be. Let me tell you, there's been a couple of times now where I was only even on par with a boss using Jeanne to fight them one-on-one when she was transformed. When she wasn't transformed, she was at a disadvantage, and that's really scary. So make sure you're saving those transformations for when you need them. Number 4, plan back attacks by abusing enemy counters. This is one of those ones that might seem really simple, but it's also something that I've learned can oftentimes go over people's heads, especially when they're first getting into a new strategy game. So since I picked up on it pretty early, I figured I would share it all with you as well. The idea of Jeanne d'Arc is that you get extra damage and accuracy by hitting an enemy from the sides, or even more so from the back. This is a pretty common thing in this type of turn-based strategy RPG. However, you also get burning aura here, wherein if you hit an enemy and you hit them in the back, then they will actually get another aura behind them for behind where you hit them from, that if someone else comes over and stands in that aura, they'll get bonus damage. It's kind of an equivalent system to something like triangle strategy, where if you're flanking an enemy and you attack them, the character that you have on the flank of the enemy will also get a free attack in. It's that similar type of idea. You still have to use your action to use that second attack with a character, but instead you're getting a damage boost for it. So it plays out kind of similarly. As such, whenever you're trying to rush down an enemy, especially if they have a lot of HP, make sure that you're actually planning accordingly to accommodate for what their current facing is and what terrain is around them, because when you go and hit them, they will then turn and counterattack you, if possible, exposing their back to another attack. If you can line things up right, you can get a bunch of extra bonus damage on a big scary enemy by swarming them with a group and figuring out the proper approach, kind of like a little puzzle, for where to attack them from first. It's just the type of thing that you need to keep an eye out for. There'll be some examples on screen here in the video footage. It's hard to explain without really like having hands on and showing it to you in action, but look at what I got going on here and you'll kind of start to get an idea of what it is that you need to go for. Speaking of burning aura, number 5, burning aura can be set up to use against other enemies. This is a cool aspect of this version of this mechanic, and it's something that I do enjoy over the way Triangle Strategy handles it, in that burning aura is not just something that you can use against the enemy that you attacked to set it up. What does that mean? Well, if you actually move into a burning aura area, you can attack any other enemy next to you or any other enemy in your range while you're standing in that aura, and you'll still get the damage boost. So you can actually plan ahead by maybe attacking a weaker enemy, using that attack to set up a burning aura that then is next to another stronger enemy or within range of another stronger enemy, so you get a damage boost against them. It's kind of like, it's a very different setup, but if you're familiar with the Disgaea games, the way that you can chain together different geo effects and like toss enemies around to get different combos and setups, it feels similar to that to me, and I really enjoy it. So if you're someone that really enjoys manipulating the battlefield and kind of figuring out how you can leapfrog from enemy to enemy efficiently, chaining your burning auras together to be able to get more damage against scarier enemies is super helpful, and it's probably going to be a little bit better than just overkilling a dude who has 10 HP left with your 66 damage burning aura, you know? Number 6, moving on from some of our battlefield strategies. Don't worry, there'll be more in this video, but as a little bit of a more meta thing, use stat boosting and attack/magic skills over affinity skills. So, if you've been playing Joan of Arc, you're probably aware you can go in and equip different skills to your characters. These could be weapon skills, these could be magic, these could be stat boosts, or they can be affinities. This affinity system is kind of like the weapon triangle in Fire Emblem, if you're familiar with that, but doesn't feel like it quite has the same level of impact here as it does in Fire Emblem. Maybe as we get further down the line and your level of affinity goes up and there's scarier enemies, we're going to want to be able to manipulate this more. But from my experience thus far in the early game, not having an affinity skill on a character is sometimes a benefit, as it means that there's no necessary weakness that you're going to have to an enemy with a particular type of affinity. And instead of having a skill equipped that gives you an affinity, you can have another more mechanically useful option available to you, like, again, more magic, more weapon skills, raw stat boosts, that type of thing. As your characters level up and you unlock more skill slots, it might be easier to slot these affinity skills in, but early on, I would say go for the more noticeable, immediately helpful things, and put the affinity skills to the side for later. Number 7, cheese strong enemies with ranged attacks to avoid counters. This one, again, should be fairly obvious, but sometimes you get new players that really don't realize the impact that these small decisions can have on their success versus their failure rate in any given mission. So, if you're running up on a very scary enemy boss, or just a big nasty enemy that hits really hard in melee, and you don't feel like taking a bunch of counters to the face or just hoping that you're able to dodge them, make use of your ranged attacks. If you're listening to my previous tips, you should have some ranged magic on your otherwise melee characters. You'll also start getting access to archers and other things like that, spear users even, that can attack from a space away. Use these types of ranged attacks to get pretty solid damage on these scary melee enemies before you're forced to get into melee with them and potentially start taking counterattacks. Counters are huge in Joan of Arc. I cannot emphasize enough how important they are and how important it is to avoid them. So use your ranged magic, use your ranged attacks, soften up the enemy, and then go into melee. Trust me, it'll work out way better for you than just trying to run in sword arm swinging and getting bopped for your trouble. And finally, number 8, spam healing magic and items at the end of a map to farm XP. Old school Fire Emblem fans, you're going to be very familiar with this one. Old school JRPG and strategy RPG fans as well, really. Any action that you take, including just a point of healing on an ally, is going to give you a small amount of XP in Joan of Arc. This means if you are at the tail end of a mission, maybe you're just trying to escape or you're waiting to run up to the boss and finish them off, you can spend a little bit of time healing up minor scrapes and bruises on your characters to get as much XP as if you had healed them from 1 to 99, right? It's all the same. You don't get more or less depending on how much healing you did. Just the action alone gets you that experience. And every little bit of experience counts. Again, at the very beginning of the video, I was saying, don't be afraid to go grind. You're going to need that XP. You might be able to save yourself a little bit of grinding if you eke out a couple of extra levels on a few different characters at the end of a mission by using some healing herbs and using some healing magic. Obviously, you don't want to go crazy with this. You don't want to be dumping all of your army's income into buying healing herbs because you use them all to heal up 1 HP on all of your characters at the end of a fight. But if you have a surplus, or again, you have MP to burn and you've got healing spells equipped on people, don't be afraid to use those skills and items to get yourself some bonus XP. It always helps. And those, my friends, are my first 8 tips for Joan of Arc, or Jeanne D'Arc, the really very, very solid, newly re-released PSP to PS4 and PS5 strategy RPG that I'm so glad that we finally have a more accessible way to play. If you've not checked this game out yet and you have a PS4 or a PS5, especially if you're a fan of turn-based strategy RPGs, I highly recommend that you go check it out. It's free if you have the appropriate tier of PlayStation Plus subscription, and even if you don't, it's only $10, right? It's not a big expense at all, and it seems like a pretty meaty game with plenty of content that you can enjoy. Also, I've heard that if you have already purchased the game on your PlayStation account from way back in the day, like on the PSP, and you go on the PlayStation Store now with that same account, you can get this version of the game that's on the PS4 and the PS5 for free because you already own it and it's just been ported to those systems with a little bit of a graphical update. So go check that out. I highly implore that you do so because this game is awesome. And if you'd like to see more videos like this or more videos discussing Joan of Arc in general, do let me know down in the comments below and I'll be sure to take some suggestions and make some more stuff. With that said, though, my name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there. And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.